recently released DNA results of the Paracas people. It's taken us 5 years. A total of 18 skulls was tested. Results were so bizarre that they decided to hide them.
For thousands of years, the desert sands of southern Peru have concealed secrets that challenge everything we think we know about human history. Ancient tombs, strange artifacts, and mummified remains whisper stories of a civilization lost to time. Yet, among these relics, one discovery stands apart. Skulls so elongated and so unlike anything else on Earth that they have become one of archaeology's most enduring mysteries. Science tells us the past is written in bones. But what happens when those bones don't fit our understanding of the human story? What happens when the DNA itself refuses to conform to any known lineage? Today, we're diving deep into one of the most controversial and perplexing findings ever unearthed in South America: the Paracas elongated skulls of Peru. Are these remains evidence of an ancient cultural practice, a forgotten branch of humanity, or something far more extraordinary? This is not just archaeology. This is a mystery that blurs the line between science and the unknown. In 1928, when Julio Tello set foot on the windswept Paracas Peninsula, he had no idea that what he was about to uncover would send ripples through the world of archaeology for generations. Beneath the coarse sands and blinding sun, his excavation revealed an enormous necropolis, a city of the dead that stretched beneath the desert floor. Hundreds of burial chambers emerged, each containing mummified remains wrapped in ornate textiles of red, gold, and brown fabrics, so intricate they seemed to whisper forgotten rituals and sacred ceremonies of a vanished world. Yet, the true enigma lay not in the textiles nor the burial customs, but in the skulls of the dead themselves. They were unlike anything he, or anyone, had ever seen. Some of the skulls were astonishingly long, stretching almost half again the length of a normal human head. Others showed only a single parietal plate, where there should have been two, and some had a cranial capacity up to a quarter larger than any recorded human average. These were not crude results of ritual deformation alone. Their structure suggested something fundamentally different, something that didn't fit the human mold. As Tello examined the remains, questions swirled like desert winds around him. Who were these people who buried their dead in such a way? And how could their bodies defy the biological boundaries of known humanity? The mystery of the elongated skulls was not unique to Paracas. Throughout history, cultures across the globe had practiced cranial deformation, a strange yet deliberate reshaping of the human head that symbolized power, divinity, and identity. From the ancient Egyptians and the Maya to the Huns of Central Asia, binding an infant's head was an act of prestige, a way to mark one's belonging to an elite or sacred class. Infants' skulls, still soft and pliable, could be molded using bands of cloth or wooden boards, creating the long, tapering shapes that would later signify nobility or divine favor. Anthropologists have long documented these practices, emphasizing that while they change the shape of the skull, they do not alter its internal structure or genetic makeup. The transformation was purely aesthetic, a cultural choice, not a biological anomaly. Yet the Paracas skulls seem to reject this rule. Their differences went beyond elongation. Some possessed bone structures denser than any known human specimen. Others had cranial sutures that didn't align with the familiar patterns found in human skulls, raising the possibility that these individuals were not simply victims or participants of head binding, but members of a group that was physically distinct at birth. What could explain such a deviation from human norms? The unease deepened as each skull was studied, each measurement recorded. The evidence refused to fit neatly into established explanations. For decades, speculation grew, but evidence remained elusive. Then, in 2014, after years of hesitation, researchers finally received permission to conduct DNA analysis on a selection of the Paracas skulls. The process was delicate. Ancient remains are notoriously prone to contamination, and the desert air had preserved them in a fragile state. Scientists extracted mitochondrial DNA, passed through maternal lineage to trace ancestral origins. When the results returned, they struck with the force of revelation. Among the tested samples were genetic markers belonging to haplogroups H and U2E, sequences typically associated with European and Near Eastern populations, not indigenous peoples of South America. The shock reverberated through the scientific community. If accurate, it meant that individuals living in Peru over 3,000 years ago carried maternal genetic signatures found thousands of miles away across oceans and continents. No known migration theory accounted for such a link, and none could explain how these Eurasian haplogroups appeared in such an isolated and ancient culture. Some scholars proposed long-lost transoceanic contact. Others, an unknown migration event erased from written memory. Yet even those explanations struggled against the sheer improbability of the data. How could an ancient Andean population possess genetic material seemingly out of place in both geography and time? But the revelations did not stop there. Within a subset of the DNA results, researchers found sequences that defied categorization entirely. Certain fragments of genetic code failed to match any known human or primate lineage. The patterns were incomplete, yet distinct enough to suggest something beyond simple contamination. For those who handled the sequencing, the implications were unsettling. They appeared to be looking at genetic data that didn't belong to any recorded species on Earth. When the news reached the public, the story ignited a storm of controversy. Some declared it evidence of a lost branch of human evolution, an ancient hybrid species that had once walked the Earth before disappearing into myth. Others went further, proposing theories that reached beyond the boundaries of science, suggesting that these beings were not of this world at all. The notion electrified audiences, but horrified traditional scholars. Skeptics countered immediately, warning that ancient DNA testing was fraught with risks, sample degradation, contamination from modern handlers, and sequencing errors. They urged caution, reminding the world that extraordinary claims required extraordinary proof. Yet, despite their warnings, the mystery refused to fade. Too many results had been verified multiple times, and too many anomalies persisted to dismiss the findings outright. Even today, the Paracas skulls rest in quiet museum cases and sealed research vaults, yet they continue to disturb the comfortable narratives of human history. Were these elongated skulls simply the result of ritual shaping, carried out with devotion and precision over generations? Or were they evidence of something that modern science is still unprepared to confront? An evolutionary chapter lost to time, buried beneath centuries of sand and silence? The truth remains obscured, caught between science and speculation, faith and evidence. But as researchers continue to probe the genetic code of these ancient remains, one thing becomes clear. Whatever the Paracas people were, their existence challenges the very framework of what it means to be human. Their skulls, silent yet eloquent, tell a story that stretches beyond archaeology into the heart of our deepest questions about origins, ancestry, and the forgotten possibilities of the past. And perhaps that is why their discovery still sends chills down the spine, because somewhere within that dry desert soil, we may have unearthed not just the bones of an ancient people, but the remnants of a history that defies everything we thought we knew. The deeper scientists delved into the Paracas discovery, the more the evidence seemed to defy what humanity understood about itself. Beyond the DNA revelations that already blurred the lines of history, the skull's very anatomy presented an even greater puzzle, one that refused to conform to the limits of known human variation. A normal human skull consists of two parietal plates, joined by a distinct suture running from front to back, a natural seam in the architecture of bone that defines our cranial formation. Yet, several Paracas skulls appeared to break this biological rule entirely, displaying a single unified parietal plate where two should have existed. This was not an illusion or the result of deformation. This was structural and intrinsic. The bones were fused in ways unseen in modern humans, suggesting that these individuals might have been biologically distinct from the rest of humankind. Adding to the mystery, their cranial capacity often exceeded the human average by as much as 20 to 25%, implying a larger brain volume. Moreover, the placement of the foramen magnum, the critical opening at the skull's base through which the spinal cord connects to the brain, was often found in positions inconsistent with standard human anatomy. In head-binding traditions, while the shape of the skull could be altered, the internal bone structure remained unchanged. But in the Paracas skulls, even the internal framework appeared to have developed differently, as if their biology itself followed rules foreign to human growth patterns. This was why some independent researchers argued that what Tello uncovered was not just an example of cultural modification, but evidence of a separate lineage, one that might have diverged from humanity's known evolutionary tree. The DNA results only intensified this enigma. The discovery of mitochondrial haplogroups H and U2E within some Paracas remains pointed toward an origin thousands of miles away, deep in the landscapes of ancient southern Russia, the Caucasus Mountains, and parts of Eastern Europe. The implications were staggering. The mainstream model of human migration teaches that all early populations of the Americas descended from groups who crossed the Bering Land Bridge from Siberia around 15,000 years ago. But the Paracas DNA did not align neatly with that narrative. If these haplogroups truly existed in pre-Columbian South America, it would force history to account for a new and uncharted migration path, perhaps one that predated the known waves of settlement. It might suggest an ancient transoceanic journey long forgotten, or the remnants of contact between distant civilizations that shared more than just trade or legend. Another theory proposed genetic convergence, the blending of an as-yet unidentified population that left behind only fragments of its lineage. And, of course, the most conservative explanation pointed to contamination or misinterpretation. Yet each possible answer, no matter how plausible, rewrote the story of how humanity spread across the globe. Despite these tantalizing clues, the majority of the scientific community remains cautious, even dismissive, of the extraordinary claims that have surrounded the Paracas findings. The consensus, grounded in decades of anthropological research, maintains that the elongated skulls are the products of deliberate cranial deformation, a cultural practice, not a genetic anomaly. Archaeologists point to abundant global evidence of head-binding traditions, all producing similar results of extended skulls and altered profiles. According to them, no verified DNA analysis has ever conclusively demonstrated sequences outside the human genome. They argue that reports of non-human markers stem from degraded or contaminated samples tested under conditions that fail to meet strict scientific standards. Bioarchaeologist Dr. Ken Nystrom once summarized this skepticism bluntly. Extraordinary claims demand extraordinary evidence, and so far, such evidence has not been produced. Still, even those who stand firmly on the side of orthodoxy cannot deny the peculiarity of the Paracas remains. Their sheer preservation, unusual size, and complex cranial formations make them outliers even within the known range of human modification. So, while the prevailing view insists that these were humans shaped by human custom, an unspoken curiosity lingers. What if there's something more? That question, what if, forms the center of a battle between science and speculation. On one side stand those who demand absolute proof. Archaeologists, geneticists, and academics who will not accept conjecture without data that can be replicated and verified. On the other side are the explorers of the unknown, independent researchers, theorists, and seekers who argue that rigid science often ignores anomalies rather than confronts them. Between these camps lies a tension as old as discovery itself, the struggle between skepticism and wonder. The Paracas skulls embody that struggle. They remind us that human history is not a fixed timeline carved in stone, but an evolving mosaic of evidence, mystery, and revelation. The bones unearthed in the Paracas Desert are not just relics, they are questions. Questions that pull at the edges of what we think we know. And within those questions lies a quiet challenge. What if the story of humanity is far more complex than we've dared to imagine? That possibility becomes even more haunting when one considers the whispers of lost civilizations that echo through ancient mythologies worldwide. From the annals of Egypt to the tablets of Mesopotamia, stories persist of beings who came from the sky or across the sea, teachers, builders, and gods who shared knowledge with early humankind before vanishing into legend. While historians and anthropologists often interpret these tales as metaphors or cultural allegories, some researchers believe they conceal fragments of forgotten history. Could it be that the Paracas people were descendants of such a civilization, one that bridged continents before the dawn of recorded time? The combination of elongated skulls, Eurasian genetic markers, and anatomical anomalies forms a pattern too strange to dismiss outright. It hints at a world once interconnected in ways we can barely fathom, where knowledge, bloodlines, and ideas may have traveled far beyond what our maps or textbooks acknowledge. If this connection existed, it would mean that the Paracas culture might represent the last visible trace of an ancient global network, erased by the relentless tide of time and buried beneath the sands of Peru. The mystery endures, as vast and silent as the desert itself. Every skull tells a story, but the words are written in a language we have not yet learned to read. Whether these beings were simply early humans with extraordinary customs or the remnants of a forgotten chapter in human evolution, their presence forces us to look deeper, to question not just where we come from, but what we might have lost along the way. The Paracas skulls stand as a haunting reminder that beneath the surface of accepted history lies another history, one still waiting to be uncovered, one that might yet redefine the boundaries of what it means to be human. The story of the Paracas skulls continues to pull humanity into one of the most perplexing enigmas ever unearthed. Yet the claims of non-human DNA remain shadowed by uncertainty and scientific dispute. The controversy largely rests on incomplete data from the original 2014 study, which was privately funded and lacked the scrutiny of full peer review. Mainstream geneticists and archaeologists argue that without replication under controlled laboratory conditions, any conclusions drawn from such testing remain speculative at best. The analysis, focused solely on mitochondrial DNA, can only trace maternal lineage. It cannot define a new species or confirm biological divergence. For such extraordinary claims, what's needed is nuclear DNA sequencing from multiple specimens, processed through verified scientific protocols. Until that happens, the academic community remains cautious, attributing the anomalies to cultural practices, natural genetic variation, or artifacts created by the degradation of ancient samples. Yet even as skepticism persists, a faint trace of mystery endures. Those unexplained genetic fragments, those irregular sequences that refuse to align neatly with known human databases, act as silent provocations, whispers from the past, hinting that not everything buried in the Paracas sands has been fully understood. Beyond the genetic intrigue, however, lies the remarkable civilization that produced these skulls. The Paracas culture flourished on Peru's arid coast between 800 BCE and 100 BCE, long before the rise of the Inca. They were innovators and artisans, known for their breathtaking textiles, woven in vibrant reds, yellows, and blues that still hold their color after more than 2 millennia. They constructed elaborate subterranean tombs, circular chambers carved into the earth, where the dead were wrapped in layers of intricate cloth and accompanied by offerings meant to guide them into the afterlife. They were also among the earliest practitioners of cranial surgery, with evidence of successful trepanations, holes cut into the skulls of living patients that later healed. The practice of cranial elongation among them was likely not just aesthetic, but sacred. The stretched skulls might have symbolized a divine connection, a physical mark of those considered closer to celestial or ancestral powers. Whether those skulls were shaped by human design or born of biological difference, they embodied how the Paracas viewed existence, a fusion of the earthly and the cosmic, the physical and the spiritual. And still, the mystery refuses to fade. Decades of research have not solved it. They've only deepened it. Every new analysis reveals another layer, another contradiction. Some studies reinforce the theory of deliberate deformation, while others detect traces that suggest unfamiliar genetic origins. This enduring ambiguity keeps the debate alive. For every skeptic who dismisses the DNA evidence as flawed, there is another investigator reanalyzing the data, finding new questions where others saw answers. The skulls have become more than artifacts. They are symbols of the tension between knowledge and wonder, between what can be proved and what can only be imagined. They stand at the crossroads of science and myth, challenging the boundaries of how far back human memory can truly reach. What all sides agree on, however, is the urgent need for more research. Only through advanced techniques, whole genome sequencing, radiocarbon cross-validation, and meticulous cross-study comparisons can the truth be uncovered. Were the Paracas people an isolated lineage, cut off from the rest of early humanity? Were they evidence of ancient transoceanic contact that history has forgotten? Or were the anomalies in their DNA the echoes of time, distorted by preservation and decay? Until peer-reviewed, large-scale testing is completed, the debate will continue to burn quietly, fueled by the human instinct to know where we came from. Because ultimately, the Paracas skulls are not just bones. They are mirrors reflecting the endless pursuit of understanding our origins. And if even part of the genetic evidence holds true, if Eurasian haplogroups truly existed in ancient Peru, it would shake the foundations of accepted history. It would suggest that the world was far more connected than our textbooks admit, that human migration and communication extended across oceans long before recorded history. And if, against all expectation, the existence of non-human genetic traits were ever verified, it would force humanity to reconsider its very place in evolution, confronting the possibility of forgotten branches in our ancestral tree. Today, as the skulls sit under museum glass, their hollow gazes seem almost aware, as if they still hold the secret of who the Paracas truly were. Perhaps the answer lies not in distant galaxies or mythical gods, but in the vast complexity of humanity itself, in the layers of history, time, and bone that still guard their secret, waiting for the moment when the truth finally emerges from the dust. The story of Peru's elongated skulls is not a closed chapter. It's an open door to questions that challenge everything we think we know about our past. Were they symbols of power, descendants of a forgotten migration, or relics of something that science has yet to name? One thing is certain: the Paracas skulls remind us that history is not settled. It's alive, mysterious, and still being written. If you found this exploration as thought-provoking as we did, don't forget to like this video, leave a comment sharing your theory, and subscribe for more deep dives into ancient mysteries, hidden histories, and the secrets science is still trying to explain. Because sometimes, the past doesn't just whisper, it roars. And if we listen closely enough, it might just tell us who we really are.